The telegram arrived on a Thursday. I remember because Thursdays were always slow at the schoolhouse. The older boys would be thinking about the weekend, and the younger ones would be watching dust motes dance in the afternoon sun. I was teaching them about the Arizona territory, about how it was changing, becoming something new, something civilized. Then Charlie Watson came running up the steps. The telegraph operator was 65 and hadn't run anywhere in a decade. I knew before he handed me the paper that the news was either very good or very bad. It was neither, really, just final. Victor McGrath deceased. Stop. Sanitarium Santa Fe. Stop. Thought you should know. Stop. I must have stared at that paper for a full minute. The children had gone quiet, the way young people do when they sense something significant happening in the adult world. Little Sarah McKenna, all of 10 years old, was the one who finally spoke up. "Mr. Brown, are you all right?" I folded the telegram and slipped it into my vest pocket. My hands were steady. They'd been steady for 15 years now, ever since I learned what steady hands really meant. "I'm fine, Sarah, thank you for asking." But I wasn't fine. I was somewhere else entirely, somewhere dusty and dangerous, and 25 years gone. Young Jack Foster raised his hand. He was 12, same age I'd been when my father died. Smart boy, curious, always asking the kinds of questions that made you think. "Mr. Brown," he said, voice careful, "my pa says you used to ride with outlaws. Is that true?" The classroom went silent again. This was the question they'd all been wanting to ask since I'd come back to Desert Thistle Valley to teach. The children had heard the stories, the whispers from their parents and grandparents. They knew I'd been something other than a schoolteacher once. I looked at Jack Foster, at his bright eyes and earnest face. Then I looked at the rest of them. 15 students, ages 8 to 16, watching me with that peculiar intensity children have when they think they're about to hear something real. Outside, the autumn wind rattled the windows. The afternoon light painted everything in shades of gold and amber. I made a decision. "Yes, Jack," I said quietly. "I rode with worse than outlaws. I rode with men who thought mercy was weakness, who believed kindness was something to be taken advantage of, who saw the world as nothing but wolves and sheep." I walked to the window and looked out at the town. Desert Thistle Valley. Some folks called it Eagle's Rest now, though the old name still stuck for those of us who remembered. But I also knew a man who taught me different, an old man who changed a town, who changed me. And if you'd like, I'll tell you about him, about the hardest lesson I ever learned. The children nodded, eyes wide. I pulled up a chair and sat down, the way a man does when he's got a long story to tell. "Then let me take you back to 1889, when I was 23 years old and thought I knew everything about the world. Back to the week when everything I believed turned out to be a lie." I closed my eyes for a moment, and the years fell away like autumn leaves. It started with dust. It always did in those days. We rode into Desert Thistle Valley on a Tuesday afternoon, 3 men on horses that had seen better days. The animals were lame, we were broke, and the Arizona sun beat down like God's own hammer on an anvil. Wade Harrison rode in front. He always did. 38 years old and hard as the desert rock, with a reputation that ran from Tucson to Tombstone. Men stepped aside when Wade walked into a saloon. I'd been riding with him for 2 years, learning what he had to teach. Jasper Thorne rode beside me, his tobacco-stained beard catching the dust we raised. He was older than Wade, meaner than a rattlesnake with a toothache, and the only man I'd ever seen make Wade think twice about anything. And then there was me, Timothy Brown, 23 years old, no family to speak of, and no particular place to be. I'd joined Wade's crew after my father died, looking for something I couldn't name. Belonging, maybe. Purpose. A reason to get up in the morning that didn't involve staring at an empty house and an emptier future. Desert Thistle Valley wasn't much to look at. A single dusty street lined with weathered buildings. A saloon. A general store. A church that looked like it was held together more by hope than nails. Maybe 200 souls called this place home, if you were generous, with your counting. The kind of town the world was forgetting, out here between the red cliffs and the endless sage. "Water," Wade said, reining his horse to a stop outside the saloon. "Then we figure out our next move." My horse stumbled as I dismounted. The poor animal had picked up a stone 3 miles back, and I hadn't had the heart to push her harder. I ran my hand along her neck, feeling the sweat and the trembling. "She needs rest," I said. Wade looked at me with those flat gray eyes of his. "We all need something, kid. World doesn't care what we need." But even as he said it, I saw something flicker across his face. Weariness, maybe, or just the weight of years spent taking what he needed because asking had never worked. The saloon doors swung open and a woman stepped out. She was maybe 50, with steel gray hair pulled back tight, and eyes that measured us in a single glance. Her hands were rough from work, her dress simple and practical. "Afternoon, gentlemen," she said. Her voice was steady, neither welcoming nor hostile, just careful. "I'm Martha Williams. I run this establishment." Wade tipped his hat with exaggerated courtesy. "Ma'am, we're just passing through, looking for water and maybe a hot meal if you've got one to spare." She studied us for a long moment. I could see her taking in the details. The worn gear, the tired horses, the fact that we didn't look quite like regular cowboys and didn't look quite like regular trouble either. "I've got stew," she said finally, "and water's free for man and beast alike. As for the meal, that'll be $2 for the 3 of you." Wade's jaw tightened. We didn't have $2 between us. We didn't have 2 bits. Before he could say anything, Martha held up a hand. "Or you could work it off. Bill Thompson at the general store needs help unloading a freight wagon tomorrow morning. Pays enough to cover your meal and a place in my stable for your horses. Fair trade." I saw the calculation happening behind Wade's eyes, taking charity stuck in his craw. But the horses genuinely needed rest, and my stomach had been complaining for the better part of a day. "That's mighty kind of you, ma'am," I heard myself say. "We'd be grateful for the work." Wade shot me a look but nodded. "What the kid said. We'll take you up on that offer." Martha smiled, just a little. "Good. Take your horses around back. There's a trough and some hay. Then come inside and I'll get you fed." As we led the horses to the stable, I noticed an old man sitting on a porch across the street. He was in a rocking chair, hands resting on a cane, weathered face shaded by a wide-brimmed hat. He looked like every old-timer in every forgotten town we'd passed through, except for his eyes. Even from a distance, I could see them tracking our every movement. Sharp, alert, the eyes of a man who saw more than most. "Who's that?" I asked Martha when we came back around. She glanced over. "That's Ezra McCree. Been living here about 5 years now. Quiet man. Keeps to himself mostly, though the children love him. Always got peppermint candy in his pockets." "What's his story?" Jasper asked, something curious in his voice. Martha shrugged. "Never asked, never told. That's how we do things here. Man's past is his own business, unless he makes it ours." Inside the saloon, the stew was simple but good. Beef and potatoes and carrots. The kind of meal that fills your belly and reminds you that civilization still exists even in the forgotten corners of the world. We ate in silence, too hungry for conversation. Through the window, I could see the old man still rocking, still watching. His hands had a tremor to them, I noticed. The shake of age or palsy or too many years carrying too much weight. "Good stew," Wade said when he'd finished. "We'll be here at dawn to help Thompson with that freight." Martha nodded and cleared the bowls. She didn't ask our names, didn't ask where we'd come from or where we were going. She'd offered kindness, and we'd accepted it. That was enough. We bedded down in the stable that night, using our saddles for pillows and our coats for blankets. The horses breathed steadily in their stalls. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to the rising moon. I was almost asleep when Wade spoke into the darkness. "Don't get comfortable here, kid. We're not staying." "Didn't figure we were," I replied. "Good. Because tomorrow I'm going to check the telegraph office. There's a bounty opportunity 2 towns over, big enough to set us up for a while." Something in his tone made me uneasy. What about the freight work? Martha's expecting us." Wade laughed, low and bitter. "The world's full of people expecting things, Timothy. Doesn't mean they get them." I didn't sleep well after that. Morning came with the smell of coffee and the sound of a rooster somewhere declaring his territory. I washed my face at the trough and found myself looking across the street again. The old man was already on his porch. I wondered if he'd ever left it. Wade returned from the telegraph office around mid-morning, and I could tell from his walk that news had come. The kind of news that meant our stay in Desert Thistle Valley was about to get shorter. He pulled me and Jasper aside behind the stable. "There's a payroll shipment coming through Copper Springs day after tomorrow. Light guard, easy pickings." Jasper grinned, showing his tobacco-stained teeth. "Now that's what I call opportunity." But I was thinking about Martha's stew, about her offer of honest work, about the way she trusted us when she had no reason to. "What about Thompson's freight?" I asked. "We gave our word." Wade's eyes went hard. "We're outlaws, kid. Our word doesn't mean a damn thing to people like them. They were kind because they thought we were something we're not. That's on them, not us." But nothing. Wade stepped closer. "You want to unload freight for $2? Go ahead. Jasper and I will handle Copper Springs without you. But understand this, men like us don't get to be grateful. We don't get to play at being honest. The world made us what we are. We just take what we need and move on." I wanted to argue. Wanted to say that Martha had treated us like human beings, not marks. That maybe we could be something other than what we'd been. But the words stuck in my throat. Because for 2 years I'd been riding with Wade, taking what we needed, moving on. It was the only life I knew. "There's a general store here," Wade continued. "Small town, probably keeps cash on hand. We could hit it on our way out. Less risk than the payroll, and we'd still have enough to get to Copper Springs in style." And that was when something changed inside me. Not dramatically, not like lightning hitting a tree, just a small shift. Like a pebble starting to roll down a hill. "We robbed the store and we're robbing the same people who fed us," I said quietly. Wade smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "That's what makes it easy, kid. They already trust us." We made our move an hour before sunset. The general store was quiet, just Bill Thompson inside counting inventory. The plan was simple. Wade and Jasper would go in the front, I'd cover the back. Quick and clean, in and out, before anyone knew what happened. I was moving toward the back door when I saw him. The old man, Ezra McCree, standing in the doorway of the general store, cane in hand, body blocking the entrance like he'd grown there. Wade had stopped 3 feet away, hand near his gun. "Out of the way, old-timer," Wade said, voice casual but carrying an edge. The old man didn't move. His hands were shaking on that cane. I could see it even from where I stood. But his voice when he spoke was steady as bedrock. "Boys," he said quietly, "I wouldn't do that." "You don't know what we're doing," Jasper growled. "Don't I?" The old man's eyes, those sharp, knowing eyes, moved from Wade to Jasper to me. "Martha gave you food. Bill offered you work. And you repay kindness with theft?" Wade's face flushed red. "You don't know a damn thing about us, old man." "I know men like you," Ezra replied. His voice was gentle, almost sad. "I was one myself, once upon a time. It's a hollow way to live, son. Empties you out until there's nothing left but the taking." "Get out of the way," Wade said again, hand definitely on his gun now. But the old man just stood there, trembling hands and all, blocking the door like he was made of the same red rock as the cliffs around us. "That the man you want to be?" he asked, looking straight at me. "One who takes from people who showed him kindness? That the story you want to tell yourself when you're my age?" And, for the first time in 2 years, I didn't have an answer. The sun was setting behind the old man, painting him in silhouette. The street had gone quiet. Somewhere a door closed. Somewhere a wind chime sang in the rising breeze. And in that moment, with dust hanging in the golden air and an old man blocking a doorway, something began that would change everything. I just didn't know it yet. In my classroom in 1904, young Jack Foster had his hand raised again. "Mr. Brown, what did you do?" Did you rob the store anyway? I looked at the boy's eager face and shook my head. No, Jack, we didn't rob the store, but not because we'd suddenly become good men. We didn't rob it because that old man standing in the doorway knew something about us that we'd forgotten. What's that? That we were still human beings, still capable of shame. Wade Harrison stared at the old man for what felt like an hour, but was probably only 30 seconds. His hand rested on his gun, but he didn't draw. Something in Ezra McCree's steady gaze had frozen him in place. Finally, Wade laughed. It was a harsh sound, brittle as old glass. "You got sand, old-timer. I'll give you that." He took a step back. "Come on, boys. This town's too small to bother with anyway." We walked away from that general store. Wade's pride was wounded, I could tell by the way his shoulders were set. Jasper kept looking back, confused by Wade's retreat. And me? I was looking at the old man, watching him watch us leave. His hands were still trembling on that cane, but his eyes never wavered. We spent that evening at Martha's saloon, nursing whiskeys we'd bought with the last of our money. Wade was quiet, which was worse than if he'd been angry. Jasper played cards with some local ranch hands, and I sat by the window, watching the street. The old man had gone back to his porch across the way. A young boy, maybe 12 years old, was sitting on the steps talking to him. I could see Ezra's hand reach into his pocket and produce something, candy probably, like Martha had said. The boy took it with a grin that could have lit up the whole territory. "Who is that kid?" I asked Martha as she passed by with a tray of glasses. She glanced out the window. "That's Jimmy Foster. Lost his pa a few years back. Ezra's taken a shine to him. Tells him stories about the desert, teaches him things. How to read weather, track animals, that sort of thing." "The old man get around much? Visit people?" Martha set down her tray and studied me with those measuring eyes of hers. "Why do you want to know?" I shrugged, trying to look casual. "Just curious. He seemed to know things about us this afternoon. Wondered how." "Ezra notices things," Martha said carefully. "Been here 5 years, and I've never seen him miss a detail. Watches the town like a hawk watches a field." She paused. "You boys thinking about causing trouble for him?" "No, ma'am," I said, and meant it. "Just trying to understand him." She nodded and moved on, but I caught something in her expression. A kind of protectiveness, like Ezra McCree meant something to this town, beyond being just another old-timer on a porch. That night, Wade finally spoke. We were back in the stable, bedding down in the hay. The horses were settling, and somewhere an owl was calling its territory. "I sent a telegram today," Wade said into the darkness, "while you two were getting coffee." "About the Copper Springs job?" Jasper asked. "No, about the old man." I sat up. "Why?" Wade was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice carried something I'd rarely heard from him: uncertainty. "Because I've seen men face down guns before, seen brave men and stupid men and desperate men. But that old-timer, he wasn't any of those things. He was calm, like he'd done it 1,000 times and knew exactly how it would end." "So?" Jasper spat tobacco into the hay. "So I want to know who he is, what he is, because men don't get that kind of calm without a reason." I lay back down, but sleep was a long time coming. Through a gap in the stable wall, I could see Ezra's house across the street. A single lamp burned in the window, warm and steady in the darkness, and I found myself wondering what that old man was thinking about, what memories kept him awake in the deep hours of the night. I paused in my telling, and little Sarah McKenna raised her hand. "Mr. Brown, were you scared of the old man?" "No, Sarah. I was scared of what he represented." "What's that mean?" "He represented a choice I didn't know I had, and nothing's more frightening than realizing you've been wrong about everything." The next day started like any other. We helped Bill Thompson unload his freight wagon as promised, earning our keep. The work was honest and hard, and I found myself enjoying it in a way I hadn't enjoyed anything in years. Wade worked in silence, his mind clearly elsewhere. Jasper grumbled about every crate and barrel, but I paid attention to the rhythm of it, the lift and carry, the careful stacking, the satisfaction of a job done right. Bill was a good man, 60-ish, with a limp from an old injury and hands gnarled by decades of work. He told stories while we worked, about the town's history, about the families who'd settled here hoping to find something better. "Ezra came about 5 years back," Bill said when I asked. "Just showed up one day, bought that little house and settled in. Quiet fellow. Helpful when help's needed, but never pushes himself forward. He got family? Not that I know of. Keeps to himself mostly, except for the children. They love him." Bill grunted as he lifted a heavy sack. "Strange thing, though." "What's that?" "His hands shake most of the time, but I've seen him handle delicate things, fixing a pocket watch, mending a torn page in a book, and they're steady as stone, like the trembling's only there when he wants it to be." That detail stuck with me. Hands that shook except when they didn't. The telegram arrived just before noon. I was carrying water to the horses when I saw Wade standing outside the telegraph office, reading a slip of paper. Even from a distance, I could see the change in his posture, the way his whole body had gone rigid. I walked over slowly, giving him time. "Wade?" He looked up at me, and his face was ashen, not angry, not scared, just hollowed out. "The old man," he said, voice strange and distant. "His name's Ezra McCree. Used to be an Arizona Ranger. They called him Eagle Eye." The name meant nothing to me, but clearly it meant something to Wade. "And?" Wade handed me the telegram. I read it quickly, then read it again more slowly, the words not quite making sense. Eagle Eye McCree, Arizona Rangers, 1868 to 1874. Known for precision shooting and mercy philosophy. Retired after incident at Clayton Ranch. Accidentally killed civilian Jack Harrison and Deputy Thomas Palmer Sr. in crossfire. Turned in badge same day. Current whereabouts unknown until now. Jack Harrison, Wade's brother. "Your brother," I said quietly. Wade took the telegram back, folding it with careful, deliberate movements. "Jack was a good man. He wasn't part of the Clayton gang. He was part of the posse trying to stop them. And some rangers shot him in the smoke and confusion. Wade, that ranger was Ezra McCree." Wade's voice was flat, empty. "The man whose life I spared yesterday. The man I walked away from like a whipped dog." I didn't know what to say. In all the time I'd ridden with Wade, he'd never mentioned his brother, never talked about family at all. "Jack had a wife," Wade continued, still in that distant voice. "A baby on the way. I was 16 when it happened, too young to do anything about it, but I swore one day I'd find the ranger who killed him. Make him pay. It was an accident, Wade. The telegram says—" "I don't care what the telegram says." The words came out sharp and sudden. Then Wade took a breath, forced himself calm. "For 15 years, I've wondered which ranger did it. All the reports just said, Arizona Ranger killed 2 civilians by mistake. No names, no accountability." He looked across the street to where Ezra sat on his porch talking to young Jimmy Foster. "And now I know. He's been sitting on that porch for 5 years, living peaceful, while Jack's wife raised their daughter alone, while He trailed off. "While you what?" I asked gently. Wade's laugh was bitter as alkali water. "While I became exactly what Jack would have hated, an outlaw, a thief, everything he stood against." He crumpled the telegram in his fist. "I blamed the world for taking him. Turns out I should have been blaming myself." In my classroom, the children were silent. Even the youngest ones understood they were hearing something true and painful. "Did Mr. Harrison kill the old man?" Jack Foster asked, voice small. "No, Jack. That's the thing about hate. Sometimes it burns so hot it burns itself out, leaves nothing but ash and questions." That afternoon, Wade did something I'd never seen him do. He walked across the street and sat down on the steps of Ezra McCree's porch. I watched from Martha's saloon, along with Jasper and half the town. Nobody spoke. We all just watched. Ezra stopped rocking. His trembling hands rested on his cane. For a long moment, the 2 men just sat there in silence. Then Wade spoke. I couldn't hear the words, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. Ezra listened, didn't interrupt, didn't defend himself, just listened. Wade talked for maybe 10 minutes. Then he stood up and walked away, heading out of town toward the desert. Not riding, just walking, like a man who needed to move or break. Ezra sat alone on his porch, and even from across the street I could see the weight settling on him, the way his shoulders curved inward, the way his head bowed. I found myself walking across that dusty street before I decided to move. "Mr. McCree?" He looked up at me. Up close I could see his eyes were wet. "You must be Timothy," he said quietly. "I've been watching you, seeing the way you hesitate before doing what Wade tells you, the way you check on your horse before you check it on yourself. Good signs in a young man." "How do you know my name?" "Same way I knew Wade's brother was named Jack. Same way I knew Jasper sends money to his sister every month." Ezra gestured to the street, to the town. "I watch, I listen, I remember. It's what I do." I sat down on the steps beside him, uninvited. "Wade says you killed his brother." "I did." The simple acknowledgement hit harder than any excuse could have. "It was an accident," I said. "Yes." Ezra's hands trembled on his cane. "But that doesn't bring Jack Harrison back to life, doesn't change the fact that his daughter grew up without a father, that his wife became a widow at 23. You retired because of it." "I retired because I realized something." Ezra looked at his shaking hands. "I'd spent 6 years as a ranger, believing I could use violence precisely, control it, make it serve justice instead of chaos. Then, one shot in the smoke and confusion, and 2 good men were dead by my hand." He was quiet for a moment, and I could hear the wind moving through the sage. "The trembling started the day I turned in my badge," he continued. "Doctor said it was palsy, but I knew better. My hands were trying to forget what they'd done, trying to shake off the weight of Jack Harrison and Thomas Palmer." "Palmer?" "The deputy who died with Jack. He had a son, Thomas Jr. He's the sheriff here now." My blood went cold. "He knows?" "He knows, has for years, chooses to forgive me, which is more grace than I deserve." I stared at this old man, this legend called Eagle Eye, and saw not a hero but a human being carrying more guilt than most men could bear. "Why'd you stand in that doorway yesterday?" I asked. "Why risk yourself for a store that's not even yours?" Ezra smiled, sad and knowing. "Because I've taken too much in my life, son. Time I started giving back, even if it's just standing in a doorway and reminding young men like you that there's another way." "What way is that?" "The hard way. The one where you choose who you become instead of letting the world choose for you." Before I could respond, a rider came thundering into town. He pulled up hard in front of the sheriff's office, horse lathered and breathing heavy. Even from where we sat, I could hear his shout, "Sheriff Palmer! Got urgent news from Santa Fe!" Thomas Palmer, son of the man Ezra had killed, came out of his office. The rider handed him a telegram, then grabbed water from the trough. I watched Palmer read the message, watched his face go pale, watched him look across the street to where Ezra and I sat. He walked over slowly, the telegram in his hand. "Ezra," he said quietly, "we got a problem." Ezra's hands stopped trembling, completely, like someone had flipped a switch. "Victor?" he asked, voice steady as bedrock. Palmer nodded. "Released from Yuma prison 3 days ago. Sent word ahead. He's coming here." "Who's Victor?" I asked. But Ezra wasn't looking at me anymore. He was staring out at the desert, at the horizon where the red cliffs met the endless sky. "An old friend," he said softly. "The best friend I ever had. Before I took everything from him." Martha had come out of her saloon. Bill Thompson from his store. People were gathering, sensing something significant in the air. "How long?" Ezra asked. 4 days, maybe 5, Palmer replied. "He's got men with him. At least a dozen, possibly more. Been recruiting on his way here." "Victor McGrath," Martha said, and I heard fear in her voice for the first time. "Dear God, Ezra, not him." Ezra stood slowly, using his cane. But the trembling was gone from his hands. His whole bearing had changed. The mild old man had been replaced by something else. Something harder, older, more dangerous. "Timothy," he said, still looking at the horizon, "you asked what way I meant. The hard way. The one where you stand your ground even when running would be easier. He turned to face the gathering crowd. I'm sorry I brought this to your town. I'll leave if you want me to. Draw Victor away from here. The hell you will, Martha said sharply. This is your home, Ezra. Has been for 5 years. We don't throw people out when trouble comes. She's right, Bill Thompson added. You've been good to this town, to our children. We stand with you. But Ezra shook his head. You don't understand what Victor McGrath is, what he's become. Then tell us, Sheriff Palmer said. Ezra was quiet for a long moment. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of distant rain. Storm clouds were building over the mountains, dark and heavy. We were partners once, Ezra said finally. Built the Arizona Rangers together, had a philosophy, shoot to disable, never to kill unless no other choice. We cleaned up 3 territories using that code. They called us the Eagle and the Hawk. He paused, and pain crossed his face like a shadow. Then raiders hit Victor's ranch, killed his wife and daughter while he was away on duty. Something broke in him that day. He started killing suspects, women, children, anyone he thought might be connected to the raiders. Said our mercy philosophy had gotten his family killed. What happened? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. The Rangers sent me to bring him in, me, his partner, his best friend, because they thought I could talk him down. Ezra looked at his hands. I tried. God knows I tried. But he drew on me. Said if I really cared, I'd let him finish what he started. Said mercy for the guilty was betrayal of the innocent. You shot him, Palmer said quietly. I shot his hands, both of them. Shattered the bones, destroyed his ability to hold a gun. Ezra's voice was hollow. I thought if he couldn't shoot, he couldn't hurt anyone. Thought maybe without his gun, he'd find his way back to being the man I knew. But, Martha prompted, but I didn't save him. I just made him hate me. Made him spend 15 years in prison learning to shoot again with ruined hands. And now he's coming here to prove that my mercy was weakness, that his way, violence, death, fear, is the only truth that matters. Thunder rolled in the distance. The storm was coming closer. Wade had returned from his walk in the desert. He stood at the edge of the crowd, listening. How many men does he have? Wade asked. Palmer checked the telegram again. Report says at least 15, possibly more. All hard cases. Killers. And you expect to stop them with what? Wade gestured around. A handful of townspeople and 1 old lawman? No, Ezra said quietly. I expect most of you to leave. Get your families to safety. This is my fight, not yours. Then why'd you stand in that doorway yesterday? I heard myself ask. Why risk yourself for this town if you were just going to tell us to run when real trouble came? Ezra looked at me with those sharp, knowing eyes. Because, Timothy, there's a difference between standing up to prevent needless violence and standing alone against men who've chosen to embrace it. He turned back to the gathered crowd. Victor McGrath doesn't want your money or your land. He wants to destroy everything I believe in, everyone I've taught, every small kindness I've tried to show, and he'll kill anyone in his way to do it. The wind was picking up now, dust devils spinning in the street. 4 days, Martha said firmly. Then we've got 4 days to decide what kind of people we are, the kind who run or the kind who stand. Martha, Ezra started. Don't you Martha me, Ezra McCree. You've been teaching our children for 5 years, teaching them to be better than the world expects, to choose mercy over violence, to see the good in people. She stepped closer. You think we're going to abandon all that the first time it gets tested? Ezra opened his mouth, then closed it. I saw something in his face I hadn't seen before. Hope, fragile as morning frost, but there. I can't ask you to die for my mistakes, he said softly. You're not asking, Sheriff Palmer replied. We're choosing. Big difference. Thunder cracked overhead, and the first drops of rain began to fall. I looked at Wade, standing there in the growing storm, looked at Jasper beside him, tobacco juice mixing with rain on his beard. Looked at this town full of people who'd shown us kindness when they had no reason to. And I thought about doorways, about the choice to block one instead of walking through it, about standing your ground when running would be easier. I'll stay, I said, if you'll teach me what you taught them. Ezra turned to me, rain dripping from his hat brim. You want to learn from the man who killed Wade's brother? I want to learn from the man who turned in his badge because he cared more about doing right than being right. The rain was falling harder now, turning the dust to mud. The storm had arrived. And somewhere out in the desert, 4 days away, a broken man with broken hands was riding toward his final reckoning. The hard way was coming for all of us, whether we were ready or not. Little Sarah McKenna was frowning at me from her desk. Mr. Brown, I don't understand. If you wanted to learn from Mr. McCree, why didn't he just teach you to shoot better? I smiled at her, sweet child, thinking the world was that simple. Because, Sarah, anyone can teach you to shoot, but only a rare man can teach you when not to. The rain stopped before dawn, leaving the desert air clean and sharp. I woke in the stable to find Wade already gone, his bedroll neatly packed. Jasper was snoring in the corner, dead to the world. I found Wade on Ezra's porch, the two of them sitting in silence as the sun painted the red cliffs gold and crimson. Neither was speaking. They didn't need to. Some conversations happened in the quiet spaces between words. I approached carefully, my boots loud on the wooden steps. Wade looked up at me, and I saw something in his face I'd never seen before. Not quite peace, but maybe the beginning of it. The first pale shoots of something green pushing through scorched earth. He told me about Jack, Wade said quietly. Every detail, didn't make excuses, didn't ask for forgiveness, just told me the truth. Ezra's hands were trembling again, I noticed, back to their usual shake. Jack was carrying a rifle, Ezra said, his voice rough with old grief. In the smoke and chaos, I saw the silhouette and the weapon, made the decision in half a heartbeat. Fired. By the time I realized my mistake, he stopped, swallowed hard. Your brother died well, Wade. His last words were to tell his wife he loved her. Wade's jaw was tight, but he nodded. Thank you for that, at least. I went to see her, Ezra continued. Jack's widow, Margaret. Offered her everything I had, my ranger salary, my savings, my horse. She refused it all. Said money wouldn't bring Jack back. He paused. She was right, of course, nothing would. Where is she now? Wade asked. Remarried, lives in Prescott with her daughter, your niece, and a good man who treats them both well. I check on them every year, make sure they're provided for. It's not enough, but it's what I can do. The sun was fully up now, warming the boards beneath our feet. Somewhere a rooster crowed his morning declaration. Wade stood slowly. I came here planning to kill you eventually, after we'd robbed the town, moved on. I was going to come back and put a bullet in you while you sat on this porch. I know, Ezra said simply. How? Because it's what I would have done, in your place, before I learned better. Wade looked at him for a long moment, then held out his hand. Teach me. Teach you what? Ezra asked, though I could tell he already knew. Whatever it is that lets you sleep at night carrying what you carry. Whatever it is that makes children love you instead of fear you. Whatever it is, Wade's voice cracked slightly, whatever it is that Jack would have wanted me to become. Ezra took Wade's hand, his grip surprisingly strong despite the tremor. That's a hard education, son. Takes longer than 4 days to learn. Then teach me what you can in the time we have. By mid-morning, half the town had gathered in the street outside Ezra's house. Martha was there with her shotgun. Bill Thompson with an old Springfield rifle. Sheriff Palmer with his service revolver. Maybe 20 people in total, ranging from ranch hands to shopkeepers to the local doctor. And me, and Wade, and even Jasper, though he looked skeptical as a snake in a bird's nest. Ezra stood on his porch, looking at the assembled group with something between gratitude and sorrow. You're all fools, he said gently. You know that, don't you? Takes one to know one, Martha shot back, which got a ripple of nervous laughter. Ezra descended the steps slowly, using his cane. When he reached level ground, he stood straighter. The trembling in his hands lessened, but didn't disappear entirely. Victor McGrath was the best gunfighter I ever knew, he said, his voice carrying clearly in the morning air. fast, accurate, and absolutely ruthless when he chose to be. He's had 15 years in Yuma to think about nothing but revenge, to train with hands that were shattered, to recruit men who share his philosophy. Which is what? Asked a young ranch hand I didn't know. That mercy is weakness, that the world respects only violence, that the strong have every right to take from the weak. Ezra paused. He's going to come here to prove I was wrong about everything, about the code we built together, about the possibility of justice without cruelty. And were you wrong? Wade asked. Ezra looked at him. I don't know anymore. I thought shooting Victor's hands instead of killing him was mercy, but I just gave him 15 years of hatred to feed on. Maybe a clean death would have been kinder. No. The voice came from Sheriff Palmer. He stepped forward, and I saw the resemblance to Ezra's description of his father, the same honest face, the same steady eyes. You showed my father mercy too, Mr. McCree. You could have covered up what happened at Clayton Ranch, could have claimed they were all outlaws, but you told the truth, turned in your badge, lived with the consequences. Palmer looked around at the assembled townspeople. That's not weakness. That's the hardest kind of strength there is. Ezra's expression softened. Your father was a good man, Thomas. I'm sorry I took him from you. I know you are, and I choose to believe that's enough. The moment hung there, heavy with forgiveness and grief and the weight of years. Finally, Ezra straightened his shoulders. All right then, if you're determined to stand with me, we'll do this properly. But understand, I'm not teaching you to kill. I'm teaching you to protect without becoming what you're protecting against. How do we do that with men who want us dead? Jasper asked, skeptical. First, Ezra said, by understanding what we're really defending. It's not buildings or money or even our lives. It's the idea that there's a better way to live than through fear and violence. He gestured toward the open desert beyond town. We start with observation. Every one of you, tell me what you see out there. People looked confused, but they called out answers. Sage, red cliffs, dust, sky. Ezra shook his head. You're naming things, not seeing them. Look again. What's actually there? I stared at the desert, trying to understand what he meant. At first it was just emptiness. Then, slowly, details emerged. The way the morning light caught the edges of the sage, turning each leaf silver. The shadows between the rocks that could hide a man or an animal. The dust patterns on the ground that told stories of wind and movement. I see tracks, I said slowly. Rabbit, maybe. And something bigger. Coyote. Good, Ezra said. What else? The way the heat rises off the rocks makes things shimmer. You could mistake a man for a mirage out there, or a mirage for a man. Better. Wade? Wade was quiet for a moment, his eyes scanning. Winds from the northwest. Clouds building over the mountains again. Rain coming tonight, maybe tomorrow. Excellent. Martha? That outcropping of rocks about 200 yards out. Perfect place for someone to watch the town without being seen. We should post a lookout there. Ezra smiled. Now you're beginning to see. The world is full of information if you know how to read it. Victor will send scouts ahead. They'll try to learn our strengths and weaknesses. We need to see them before they see us. In my classroom, Jack Foster raised his hand. Mr. Brown, this doesn't sound like fighting. It sounds like thinking. Exactly right, Jack. That's what Mr. McCree was teaching us, that violence is what happens when thinking stops. For the next 2 hours, Ezra walked us through the town, pointing out angles and approaches, blind spots and defensive positions. He moved differently now. The shuffling old man was gone, replaced by someone who'd spent years thinking about how violence flows through spaces. Timothy, stand there. He directed me to a spot in the middle of the street. Now, Jasper, you're trying to approach him unseen. Where do you go? Jasper studied the street, then moved behind a water trough. Good choice, Ezra said. Low profile, hard cover, but you've left tracks in the dust. Timothy, do you see them? I looked where Jasper had walked. The disturbed dust was obvious once I knew to look for it. Yes, sir. So you know exactly where he went. Your move. I thought about it. I don't shoot him. I call out. Tell him I see him. Give him a chance to surrender. And if he doesn't, then I I shoot near him. Show I could have hit him but chose not to. Make him understand he's outmatched. Ezra nodded slowly. Not bad. But what if he has a hostage? The question stopped me cold. I hadn't thought that far. Then shooting near him might spook him into hurting the hostage, Wade said. He'd been watching carefully. You'd need to be precise. Disable his weapon, not him. Show me, Ezra said. Wade drew his revolver, a move so smooth it looked like magic. He didn't point it at Jasper, just held it ready. I'd wait for a clear shot at the gun itself. Moment he shifted position, barrel visible. One shot knocked the weapon away. Could you make that shot? Ezra asked. Wade was honest. Maybe, on a good day, with luck. Then we'll practice until it's not luck, until it's skill. Ezra turned to the group. That's what these next days are about, not making you into killers, making you precise enough that killing isn't necessary. We broke for lunch, and I found myself sitting with Martha at her saloon. She'd made sandwiches for everyone. Simple food, but good. The kind that reminds you there's still civilization in the world. You knew about Mr. McCree from the start, didn't you? I asked her. Martha looked at me with those sharp eyes. Knew who he'd been, if that's what you mean. Why'd you protect him? She was quiet for a long moment, then made a decision. Come with me. She led me upstairs to her private rooms. They were neat and spare, but on one wall hung a framed newspaper clipping. I stepped closer to read it. Tragedy at Copper Canyon. Deputy U.S. Marshal kills 6 in rampage. The article was dated 1874, about a year after Ezra had retired. It described how a deputy marshal named Victor McGrath had shot 6 people in a small mining camp, claiming they were harboring Apache raiders. An investigation found no evidence of this. 3 of the dead were women, 1 was a child. And among the dead was a name that made my breath catch. James Williams, merchant. Your husband, I said softly. Martha nodded. James and I had been married 6 months. We'd just opened a general store in that camp. We were going to build something together. Her voice was steady, but I could hear the iron control behind it. McGrath came through like a storm. James tried to tell him there were no raiders. McGrath shot him for interfering with federal business. I'm so sorry. I was 22 years old, Martha continued. I'd never fired a gun before that day, but after James died, I learned. Became one of the best shots in the territory. Spent 3 years tracking McGrath, planning how I'd kill him. What stopped you? Ezra did. He's the one who finally brought McGrath in, shot his hands to disable him. When I heard about it, I rode to where they were holding him for trial. I had a rifle, had a clear shot. Was ready to put a bullet in McGrath's head and call it justice. She turned to look at me. Ezra stepped in front of my rifle. Said if I killed McGrath that way, I'd become what I hated. Said there was another path. A harder one, but a better one. Did you believe him? No, but I was curious enough to listen. Ezra spent 2 days talking to me. Not preaching, not judging, just talking. About James, about grief, about the difference between justice and revenge, about how the person we become matters more than the things we do. Martha smiled sadly. By the end, I realized something. Killing McGrath wouldn't bring James back, wouldn't heal anything, would just add another death to the pile and leave me empty. So you let him live. I let Ezra take him to trial. McGrath got 15 years, and I got my life back. Moved here, opened this saloon, started over. She looked at the newspaper clipping. But I never forgot, never forgave, not really. Just chose to build something new instead of destroying something old. And now McGrath's coming here. Yes, and I'll stand with Ezra against him. Not because I've forgiven McGrath for killing my husband, but because Ezra was right about the person I wanted to become. She turned back to me. He can be right about you too, Timothy, if you let him. That afternoon, Ezra took Wade, Jasper, and me out to the desert training ground Martha had mentioned in passing. It was a flat area about a mile from town, backed by red cliffs that would stop stray bullets. Someone had set up a fence rail with bottles balanced on it. The usual way to practice, Ezra said. is to shoot those bottles, break them, prove you can hit what you aim at." He handed Wade a gun. "Go ahead, show me what you can do." Wade took careful aim and fired. The first bottle exploded into glass shards. So did the second, and the third. "Good shooting," Ezra acknowledged. "Now let me show you something different." He took the gun, and I saw the transformation happen again. His hand stopped trembling completely. His whole bearing changed, became centered, focused, still. He fired once. A bottle spun off the fence rail and landed in the dust. Intact. "What the hell?" Jasper muttered. Ezra handed the gun back to Wade. "Shoot to break, and that's all you can do. Shoot to disable, to control the outcome precisely, and you have options. Break the bottle if you must, or knock it over without breaking it, or shoot it out of someone's hand without hitting their fingers." "How's that even possible?" I asked. "Angle, force, precision." Ezra gestured to the bottles. "Try it. Knock one over without breaking it." We tried. God, how we tried. Wade's first shot went high, missing entirely. His second shattered the bottle. His third, fourth, and fifth all produced the same result: broken glass. I did no better. Jasper gave up after 3 attempts. "This is impossible," Wade said, frustrated. "No," Ezra replied calmly. "Just difficult. There's a difference." He picked up a rock, roughly the size and shape of a revolver grip. "Before you can control a bullet, you must control your body. Hold this rock at arm's length. Keep it steady for 10 minutes. "That's it?" Jasper scoffed. "Try it." We tried. Our arms started shaking after about 2 minutes. By 5 minutes, the trembling was so bad we could barely hold the rocks. None of us made it to 10 minutes. Ezra watched without comment. Then he picked up his own rock, extended his arm, and held it perfectly still. For 30 minutes. His arm didn't waver, didn't shake, was steady as the cliffs behind us. When he finally lowered it, there was no hint of strain on his face. "Control begins with the body," he said. "Master that, and the gun becomes an extension of your will. Fail that, and the gun controls you." We practiced until sunset, our arms aching and our pride wounded. Not once did any of us succeed in knocking over a bottle without breaking it. As we walked back to town, Wade spoke quietly to Ezra. 4 days isn't enough time to learn this." "No," Ezra agreed. "It's not. Took me 3 years to master it myself. But that's not the point." "Then what is?" "The point is understanding. Once you know this level of precision is possible, you start thinking differently. Start seeing options where before you only saw violence or submission." He stopped walking and turned to face us. "Victor is coming with men who see only 2 choices: kill or be killed. You don't have to match their skill to beat them. You just have to see a third choice they can't imagine." Thunder rumbled in the distance. The storm clouds Wade had predicted were building, dark and heavy over the mountains. "What third choice?" I asked. Ezra smiled, and for a moment I saw the young ranger he must have been. Idealistic, brilliant, dangerous. The choice to be better than they expect, to respond to violence, not with greater violence, but with precision, with mercy, with the kind of strength that doesn't need to prove itself. The first drops of rain began to fall. "Come on," Martha called from the road ahead. "Storm's breaking. We need to be inside." But Wade lingered beside Ezra, looking at the old man with something like wonder. "You really believe this, don't you?" Wade asked. "That mercy is stronger than violence." "I believe," Ezra said slowly, "that violence is easy. Any fool can pull a trigger, but to have the power to kill and choose not to face death and respond with life, that takes a rare kind of courage. Even when the other man shows no mercy. Especially then. The rain was coming harder now. We hurried toward town, boots splashing through puddles that hadn't existed an hour before. Behind us, the desert was drinking deep, storing water against the drought to come. And ahead of us, somewhere in that storm, a broken man with broken hands was riding closer. 3 days now. 3 days until we discovered whether mercy was wisdom or folly. 3 days until Ezra's philosophy would be tested by the one man who knew it best. The one man who'd helped create it, then spent 15 years learning to destroy it. In my classroom, the autumn light was fading. I'd been talking for nearly 2 hours, and not one child had moved. Even the youngest sat transfixed. 3 days, I said softly. That's all the time we had. 3 days to become something other than what we'd been. McGrath arrived on a Thursday morning, just like the telegram had predicted. The rain had stopped the night before, leaving the desert air sharp and clean. We saw the dust cloud rising from the east while the sun was still low and red. 15 riders, maybe more. They came slowly, deliberately, like a storm that knows it has all the time in the world. Ezra stood on his porch watching them come. His hands were perfectly steady now, had been since the night before, when he'd made his decision. I stood beside him along with Wade, Martha, and Sheriff Palmer. The rest of the town was hidden, women and children in the church basement, fighting men at their assigned positions. We'd spent 3 days preparing for this moment, 3 days of Ezra's teachings, 3 days of learning to see differently. The riders stopped at the edge of town, and a single man rode forward. Even from a distance, I could see Victor McGrath's hands. They were twisted, the fingers bent at unnatural angles. But they held his reins steady, and when he stopped his horse, they moved to rest on the twin revolvers at his hips. He'd learned to shoot again. 15 years of practice with broken hands. "Ezra," McGrath called out, his voice carrying clearly across the empty street. "My old friend, my brother, the man who taught me that mercy was strength." Ezra didn't move, just stood there, watching. McGrath dismounted slowly. He was older than Ezra by a few years, his hair completely white, his face carved by time and hatred into something harder than the desert rock. "I've dreamed of this day," McGrath continued, walking forward. His men stayed mounted, watching. 15 years I've thought about nothing else, about how to prove you wrong, about how to destroy everything you believe. "I know, Victor," Ezra said quietly. "I would have done the same." McGrath stopped about 20 feet away, close enough to talk, far enough that drawing would still be a choice. "Do you know what they did to me in Yuma?" McGrath asked. His voice was conversational, almost pleasant, which made it more terrifying. "First year, I couldn't hold a spoon, couldn't feed myself, had to be treated like an infant, all because you chose mercy. I'm sorry for your pain, Victor, but not for the choice." "Of course not. Because you still believe it, don't you, that there's a better way? That violence can be precise and controlled. That mercy is somehow nobler than justice." "Justice and mercy aren't opposites," Ezra replied. "They're partners. One without the other is just cruelty wearing different clothes." McGrath smiled, and it was a terrible thing to see. "Beautiful words. Let's test them." He raised his hand, and his men moved, but not toward us, toward the church. "No!" Martha screamed, but it was too late. They'd been planning this all along. While we'd been watching McGrath, half his men had circled around to the church where the non-combatants were hiding. They'd moved in the blind spots Ezra had taught us to see, but we'd been focused on the wrong threat. We'd been outthought. Within minutes, McGrath's men had rounded up 12 people from the church basement. I saw Jimmy Foster among them, his young face trying to be brave. I saw Bill Thompson's wife. I saw children I'd watched Ezra give candy to just days before. They chained them together in front of the church. One of McGrath's men placed something at their feet, a barrel of black powder with a fuse. "Now," McGrath said pleasantly, "we'll see what your mercy is worth, old friend. You and me. A duel. Right here, right now. You win, they live. You lose, they die. You refuse to fight." He struck a match, let it burn for a moment, then dropped it. The fuse caught with a hiss and a spark. "You have 1 hour before that powder sends your philosophy to hell." Ezra stood frozen. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked old, truly old. "You can't do this, Victor," he said, and there was pleading in his voice. "I can. I am. This is what mercy earns you, Ezra. Dead children, burning innocents, All because you didn't have the strength to end me when you had the chance. Wade moved beside me, hand on his gun. We can rush them. No, Palmer whispered. They've got rifles trained on the hostages. First shot we fire, they'll execute them all. We were trapped. McGrath had turned Ezra's philosophy against him perfectly. Fight and potentially kill, violating everything he believed. Refuse and watch innocents die. There was no third choice, or so we thought. I'll fight you, Ezra said quietly. But first, let the children go. This is between us. Everything is between us now, McGrath replied. That's what you taught me, that every choice has consequences. These people chose to stand with you. Now they'll learn what that costs. The fuse burned steadily, creeping toward the powder barrel. I looked at Wade, at Martha, at Palmer, saw the same calculation happening in their eyes. We'd learned to shoot precisely, to disable without killing. But we weren't good enough yet, weren't fast enough. Any move we made would result in death. Then I remembered Ezra's words. You don't have to match their skill to beat them. You just have to see a third choice they can't imagine. Mr. McCree, I said quietly, the observation skills you taught us, can we use them? Ezra's eyes sharpened. What do you see, Timothy? I forced myself to look past the horror, past the fear, to see the details. The powder barrel, it's positioned away from the hostages, not right next to them. The fuse is long, giving us time, not taking it away. Good. What else? Wade spoke up. Two of his men keep looking at each other. They're nervous. Not all of McGrath's crew is committed to this. The chains, Martha added. They're using one long chain, not individual bindings. Cut it in one place, everyone's free. Palmer nodded slowly. And McGrath's standing alone. His men are spread out watching the hostages. If we could separate him from his support. Now you're thinking, Ezra said. Then louder. Victor, you want a duel? Fine, but not here. Out in the desert where it's just you and me, the way it should be. McGrath considered this. Why would I agree to that? Because you want to prove I'm wrong about mercy. You want to break my philosophy completely. You can't do that by hiding behind hostages and explosive barrels. That's just terrorism. Where's the honor in that? Where's the proof? I saw the calculation in McGrath's eyes, his pride warring with his caution. What I want, McGrath said slowly, is for you to understand what your mercy cost me. For you to feel what I felt when my family died because I showed restraint instead of strength. Then show me. Face me alone. Prove your way is better than mine without using innocence as leverage. The fuse burned. 40 minutes left, maybe less. McGrath nodded slowly. All right, but the hostages stay here. The fuse stays lit. You have until it reaches the powder to kill me in a fair fight. You win, my men let the hostages go. You lose, they die. You stall or refuse to shoot to kill. He gestured to the burning fuse. Well, you understand consequences. It was still a trap, but at least now it was one we could work with. Agreed, Ezra said. As he stepped off the porch, I grabbed his arm. What's your plan? To do what I've always done. Trust that there's a better way, even when I can't see it yet. Then he walked toward McGrath, and the two old partners faced each other in the dusty street. While everyone's attention was on Ezra and McGrath, we moved. Palmer had assigned each of us a task. Wade was to work his way toward the nervous guards. Martha would position herself for a shot at the chain binding the hostages. I was to get close enough to the powder barrel to disable the fuse. We moved slowly, using the buildings and shadows, using everything Ezra had taught us about observation and patience. In the street, Ezra and McGrath were talking, not fighting yet, just talking. And I realized that was the plan. Keep McGrath focused on him, buy us time. Do you remember, Ezra was saying, the first man we arrested together, that cattle rustler in Prescott? McGrath's expression flickered. Billy Thompson. He drew on us. And we both fired. But neither of us killed him. We shot his gun away, his belt, the ground at his feet, gave him 3 chances to surrender before we had to hurt him. He surrendered. He did, because we gave him the choice. That was our code, Victor. Our way, remember? I was close to the powder barrel now, close enough to see that the fuse was wrong. The burn was too steady, too perfect, almost like it was fake. I looked closer. The fuse was real enough, but it was burning toward a barrel that had no powder smell, no weight settling. It was empty. A bluff. McGrath had never intended to blow up the hostages. He'd wanted Ezra to believe he would, wanted to force him into a kill or be killed situation. But the actual threat was the men with rifles, not the barrel, which meant we'd been worried about the wrong thing. I caught Wade's eye and signaled, "The barrel is a decoy." He processed this, then nodded and passed it along to Martha and Palmer. The real fight wasn't going to be with McGrath. It was going to be with his men when they realized their boss's bluff had been called. In the street, McGrath's patience was wearing thin. "Enough talking, old friend. Draw." "No," Ezra said simply. "Draw, damn you. Prove your philosophy. Show me that mercy can win when everything's at stake." "I already have," Ezra replied quietly. And then he did something that stopped my heart. He drew his revolver smoothly, that same fluid motion I'd seen before, and shot it. His own gun. The bullet struck the trigger mechanism and the weapon fell from his hand in pieces. Completely disabled, utterly useless. Ezra stood there unarmed, facing a man who wanted him dead. "There," he said softly. "I've disarmed the most dangerous weapon in this fight. Myself. Now, Victor. Now you prove your philosophy. Kill an unarmed man. Become the monster you think the world requires. Or remember who you were before grief broke you." McGrath's face went through a dozen emotions. Rage, confusion, something that might have been grief. His twisted hands moved to his guns. And that's when Wade made his move. He'd worked his way close to one of the nervous guards, a young man who couldn't have been more than 20. Wade spoke quietly to him, too low for me to hear, but I saw the guard's face change, saw him lower his rifle slightly. Martha was already in position. At Wade's signal, she fired once. The chain binding the hostages shattered, and people scattered. McGrath's men reacted, but they were confused. The hostages were free, the powder barrel was fake, and their leader was focused entirely on Ezra. Sheriff Palmer and his deputies emerged from their positions, guns drawn. "Drop your weapons, you're surrounded." Most of McGrath's men weren't true believers. They were hired guns, in it for money, not philosophy. When they saw the situation collapsing, when they realized the powder barrel had been a bluff, most of them threw down their weapons, but not all. One man, older, harder, loyal to McGrath in a way the others weren't, raised his rifle toward Ezra's unprotected back. And Marshal John Cooper, who'd ridden in 2 days ago to help his old friend, threw himself in front of the bullet. The shot echoed across the desert. Cooper fell, blood spreading across his shirt. The world stopped. Ezra dropped to his knees beside his fallen friend, hands shaking again, pressing against the wound. John, no, stay with me." Cooper smiled, blood on his teeth. "Ezra, you were right. This way. This is the way. Philosophy worked. Saved the boy." He was looking at Jimmy Foster, who stood free among the scattered hostages, alive and unhurt. "John, please, tell my wife I did right. Finally, did right." And Marshal John Cooper, who'd come to help prove that mercy was stronger than violence, died holding his old friend's hand. McGrath stood frozen, his gun still holstered. He'd watched the whole thing unfold, watched his carefully planned revenge collapse not through violence, but through trust, coordination, and sacrifice. Watched an unarmed man he'd hated for 15 years kneel in the dust beside a dying friend. Watched mercy win. His hands trembled on his gun grips. Everyone could see it. One draw, and he could kill Ezra. End this, prove his point. But Ezra wasn't even looking at him, was focused entirely on Cooper, tears running down his weathered face. "Shoot me, Victor," Ezra said without looking up. "Prove violence is stronger. Prove I was wrong about everything." McGrath's fingers tightened and released. The guns stayed holstered. "I can't," he whispered. "God help me, Ezra, I can't." He fell to his knees in the dust. 15 years. 15 years of hate and planning and training. And you win by destroying your own weapon. By trusting people who had no reason to trust you. His voice broke, by being right about everything. Ezra finally looked at him. "I wasn't right, Victor. I shot your hands instead of talking you down. I killed Jack Harrison and Thomas Palmer by accident because I wasn't careful enough. I've been wrong about so many things. But not about mercy. No, not about that." McGrath's twisted hands covered his face. "What do I do now? I've wasted 15 years, hurt people, become the very thing we swore to stop." Ezra stood slowly, leaving Cooper's body with gentle reverence. He walked to McGrath and held out his hand. "You do what I did. You choose to be better tomorrow than you were today. It's the only choice any of us has." McGrath looked at that offered hand for a long moment. Then he took it. And in that dusty street in Desert Thistle Valley, two old partners who'd been broken by time and tragedy found something that might eventually become forgiveness. I paused in my telling. The classroom was completely silent. "Did Mr. McGrath go back to prison?" Sarah asked quietly. "Yes. He testified against his own men, which reduced his sentence. Served 5 more years. But he was different after that. Spent his time teaching other prisoners, trying to pass on the philosophy he'd spent so long trying to destroy." "And he died this week?" "Yes, in a sanitarium in Santa Fe. The telegram said he went peacefully. And that his last words were, 'Tell Eagle Eye I finally understand.' The aftermath was harder than the battle." Marshal Cooper was buried in the Desert Thistle Valley Cemetery with half the territory in attendance. His wife forgave Ezra, which was a grace Ezra claimed he didn't deserve but accepted anyway. Wade took a bullet during the confusion when McGrath's men were being rounded up, a shot to the spine from one of the die-hard loyalists. He survived, but he'd never walk again. Spent the rest of his life in a wheelchair, teaching young men in the territorial prison about the cost of the outlaw life. Martha's saloon had caught fire during the battle. One of McGrath's men had been careless with a lamp. It burned to the ground. The town rebuilt it together, bigger and better, but Martha always said it wasn't quite the same. And me, I stayed. Learned everything Ezra would teach me. Never did master that trick of knocking bottles over without breaking them, but I learned the more important lessons about observation, about choices, about the kind of man I wanted to be. My hands shook for months after that day. Still do sometimes when I remember Cooper falling, when I think about how close we came to failing, but they steady when I hold a piece of chalk, when I write lessons on the blackboard for children who deserve to know there's a better way. Ezra lived another 10 years after that day, died peacefully in his sleep in 1899, surrounded by the children he'd taught and the town he'd changed. They renamed the town Eagle's Rest, though some of us still call it Desert Thistle Valley. Both names are true in their way. Before he died, Ezra gave me his ranger badge, the same one he'd turned in all those years ago, that he'd kept as a reminder of what he'd been and what he'd chosen to become. "Pass it on," he told me. "When you find someone worthy, someone who understands that the real strength isn't in the gun, it's in knowing when to set it down." I reached into my vest and pulled out 2 badges, Ezra's badge, tarnished with age, and McGrath's, which had arrived with the telegram about his death. I walked to Jack Foster's desk and placed Ezra's badge in front of him, then to Sarah McKenna's desk, where I placed McGrath's badge. These belong to 2 men who built something good, lost their way, and fought their way back to what mattered, one through stubbornness, one through hate that finally burned itself out. But both came back. I looked around the classroom at all those young faces. You'll all have moments when you'll have to choose, violence or mercy, revenge or forgiveness, the easy way or the hard way. And I can't tell you which to choose. That's your decision to make. But I can tell you what I learned from an old man on a porch, that mercy isn't weakness, that precision matters more than power, that the person you become is more important than the things you do, and that it's never, never too late to choose to be better. The sun was setting when I dismissed class. The children filed out quietly, thoughtful, carrying the story with them. Jack Foster lingered, holding Ezra's badge carefully. Mr. Brown, was Mr. McCree scared when he destroyed his own gun? I thought about that, about Ezra's face in that moment. No, Jack. I think for the first time in 15 years, he wasn't scared at all, because he'd finally figured out what real courage looks like. What's that? Trusting that doing the right thing is enough, even when you can't see how it'll work out, even when everyone tells you you're wrong, even when it costs you everything. The boy nodded slowly, then carefully pinned the badge inside his jacket close to his heart. I watched him go, then sat back at my desk. Through the window, I could see the town settling into evening, lamps being lit, families gathering for supper, the ordinary, precious rhythm of a place where people had chosen to be better than the world expected. My hands rested on the desk, steady and calm. And somewhere out in that vast desert, under that infinite sky, I could almost hear an old man's voice on the wind. "Well done, son. Well done." The end.